So for this slide over here, Babinski is going to be positive if there's a lesion. If there's no lesion, the toes should curl. That's a reflex we have. If the toes extend instead of curl or flex, that's a positive. This means a lesion. This is not okay. You can try it on yourself. Just touch yourself in the foot, and you'll see your toes flexing reflexively. Over here, they're going to be extending if it is reversed. Plus, we're going to see the cremasteric reflex. I'm not going to go into the mechanism of this, but this is just two nerves, sensory over here and motor in the scrotum, that go inside the same pathway towards the spinal cord. So usually in a healthy person, you'll see a scrotum elevated if you touch here. You will not see it if there's an upper motor neuron lesion. Isn't it above or below the red nucleus? What is above or below the red nucleus? Oh, you're talking about the midbrain. Well, for decorticate and decerebrate, yes, the red nucleus is in the midbrain region. So if you want to refer to that specifically, you could, but I would just say anywhere in the midbrain, either above it, that's going to be decorticate, or below it, that's going to be decerebrate. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. And this table is again from your book. It just shows you the differences between deficits for an upper or a lower motor neuron. If for an upper motor neuron lesion, deficits are going to be either contralateral or ipsilateral below the lesion. If you are before the decussation, you're going to be the deficits are going to be contralateral. But if the lesion is higher above the decussation, you're going to be symptoms that are contralateral. If the lesion is below the decussation, which is most of the spinal cord, you're going to be seeing ipsilateral symptoms. For lower motor neurons, it's always ipsilateral, because who are the lower motor neurons? Those are the ones that exit the spinal cord and are going to whatever muscles they need to innervate. So that's always going to be ipsilateral. That's always where they leave the spinal cord. What are the symptoms we're going to see? So if it's an upper motor neuron lesion, it's a spastic paresis. Lower is flaccid. Too much reflex in upper motor neuron lesion, less, not at all, no reflex at all in lower motor neuron reflex. Babinski side for upper, no Babinski for lower. What else is important over here? We're going to see atrophy of muscles in both cases because the patient does not move too much at all. There is a large area of the body involved for upper motor neurons, but a very small one for lower. Because imagine lower motor neurons exit the spinal cord and they innervate specific muscles. So that's a very specific lesion. Upper motor neuron is a lesion that is higher up, and it has to do with the whole bundle of those upper motor neurons as they travel downwards towards the lower motor neurons. So that means a very large region of the body could be affected. So clasp knife, if you ask someone to flex their hand with resistance to force, so if you hold their hand and ask them to try to flex their hand against you pushing on it, so they'll do that, and all of a sudden this movement will happen, all of a sudden extending without them controlling it. That's something we see with upper motor neuron lesions specifically, and just decreased muscle tone for lower motor neurons. So clasp knife, like the knives that go in and out very quickly, those movements in the hands, the sudden movements, that's clasp knife reflex. So to summarize, a lesion to the corticospinal tract, if they occur above the pyramidal decussation, we're going to have contralateral symptoms. If it happens below, we'll have ipsilateral. This is for upper motor neurons specifically. And then for lower motor neurons, it's always going to be ipsilateral. Okay. Now let's switch to the sensory tracts. Sensory tracts are ascending. They're coming from the body towards the central nervous system. One second, there's a question, class knife reflex. You mean they're able to provide resistance, but not in lower? Well, they're able to provide some resistance. Of course, it's going to be very low resistance because they barely can move their limbs because of that lesion somewhere, right? Because if there's a lesion to lower motor neurons, they're going to have a lot of trouble moving their limbs because they're so flaccid. If there's an upper motor neuron lesion, it's going to be very, what's the word? I'm blanking out of the word, sorry. Very spastic, very spastic. So it's kind of always contracted, and there's a very a big difficulty to move the limbs. The clasp knife specifically is, as opposed to force, all of a sudden you'll see these sudden movements, sudden flexions, and that's very, very specific to upper motor neuron lesions, not to lower. If you ask a patient to just do that when there's a lower motor neuron lesion, they're just going to find it hard to do, but there's not going to be this jerky movement that is very sudden and involuntary. For sensory tracts, so the ascend, they're coming from the body and they ascend towards the cortex, cerebral cortex, through the thalamus. They travel in the dorsal aspect of the spinal cord. Oh, am I breaking up? Can you guys hear me well? Yes? Okay, cool. Okay, super. Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely let me know if there's anything wrong with the audio or video at any point. So dorsal columns, they're found posteriorly in the spinal cord. They travel superiorly to the thalamus and the cortex. And the dorsal column pathway specifically is also called the medial lemniscal system. It's called that because it decussates in the medial lemniscus, which is found again in the medulla. So just think about the medulla, where a place where many things decussate. And so information travels from the body up through the spinal cord, decussates in the medulla, continues upwards to the thalamus and then the cortex. And this time we have three neurons, not two, but three. The one that comes from the body, the one that decussates in the medulla, and the one that synapses on in the thalamus, on the last one that's going to go to the cerebral cortex, specifically to the primary somatosensory cortex. The function of this system is touch, vibration, and proprioception. These three modalities, that's the information these neurons carry. And so different lesions over here, if there's a lesion in either A, B, or C, we're going to see contralateral deficits. Why? Because these lesions are before the decussation. So imagine this neuron coming from the left side of the body, up, decussates, and then to the right side of the brain. So anything in the cortex, thalamus, or medulla, just above the medulla, would mean contralateral deficits because the neuron came from here. But anything after this decussation, regardless of where it is in the spinal cord, that is going to mean ipsilateral. So a lesion over here on the left, deficits on the left over here, because this is where the neurons traveled originally. Romberg sign is something I'm going to go over multiple times during these talks. Today, it's called Romberg. So the Romberg sign, what it is a patient that is really unstable in general. And then you ask them to stand next to a wall. So the back is against the wall with feet together, and the eyes are open. And you see they're a bit unbalanced, but they're doing, fine, approximately just about. But then when the eyes are closed, when you ask them to close their eyes, they almost fall down completely. And the reason is because, well, while their sensory system is deficient and there's not enough information going to the brain from their entire body because the dorsal columns over here are lesioned, The eyes are open, so if I'm not sure if I'm standing on the floor because I can't feel it well, at the very least, I can look at the floor and see that I'm standing, so that leads me to be a bit more stable. But what happens when I close my eyes, I don't have that information anymore. I'm less stable, so I'm more likely to fall down. That's called a Romberg sign. And if you see this, you know you're talking about a lesion to this medial lemniscal system specifically, where you see imbalance but manageable if the eyes are open, unmanageable if the eyes are closed. Fine touch, yes, so fine, proprioception, fine touch, and vibration. So crude touch is kind of like a borderline definition that's more pain than touch, because if the touch is crude enough, it'll, you know, elicit pain sensation. So that is more related to the spinothalamic